How does a grown adult our age not know any songs from Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch?
What if Marky Mark didn't have the Funky Bunch?
Then he wouldn't have music.
Then he would just have his looks, his chiseled chest to go off.
Yeah, because it's funny is up until like the Funky Bunch start singing, I was somebody's like, I don't. I made a reference to Marky Mark, and they're like, who? Like Marky Mark, Mark Wahlberg.
Marky Mark?
Yeah, and they're like, I don't know any of his. I was like, you're older than me. Why? How do you not know that?
That's probably what it is right there.
Well, not much older. And and they're like, I don't, And then I started playing "Good Vibrations," which is, I'm assuming, probably his most popular song,
Probably.
and it's mostly not him, which is probably why it's the most popular song.
Yeah,
So
it's pretty funny. There's a yard sign in my neighborhood that talks about. It's like one of those presidential yard signs, but it says, the Wu-Tang is forever. And my wife's like, "What's Wu-Tang?"
you're like,
How do you not know?
like, which rock did you grow up under?
Yeah, had to be there, I guess. Had to be there. Isn't that the story
Yeah.
of every generation? You had to be there.
Good thing is that when I started playing it, they're like, "Oh yeah, I know that song."
Mm.
Like, well, then how'd you not know it was Marky Mark?
You do realize that you're still letting me down here.
Exactly.
Hilarious. That's a good story for the day right there.
How do you not know Marky Mark?
Is this what you're typing into a chat somewhere right now?
No. It should be, but no.
So what's new?
Permit was submitted finally.
Woo! What was the original date that was supposed to go in?
Oh, the original date, December of 19.
Oh my gosh!
And then changes happened, lots of them, and so yeah, lots of changes.
That's awesome. The story of architecture.
Well, we have this person to listen to, and this person to listen to, and this person to listen to.
Oh, there's a new person. Gotta listen to him.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, wouldn't it be easier if you got them all in the same room so they could talk about the same building together? Oh, no, we can't do that because of this and that and the other thing. And you're like, okay.
Number one, their schedules don't align. Number two, they don't like each other.
Number three, they're not supposed to know that this person's involved with it yet.
Yeah, and that other group can't know what this group's getting. And
oh my gosh, that actually in lab design, as you know this, it's everything has to, the parity. It just, everything has to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, I've heard stories and have seen stories or experienced stories where a PI will measure their office and measure the adjacent office and say, why is their office 2 inches bigger in X direction or Y direction?
Oh my God, you petty PI.
Like, are you kidding me? Like, are they?
I don't know. Ask the contractor. Jeez.
Are they 2 square feet? Are they 2 square feet better than me? Well, at this point in time,
just because you're bringing this up, I'm going to say yes.
Exactly. My goodness.
Yeah, there's amazing amount of politics with that kind of thing, that you have to keep these groups separate and keep the communication separate and get on the same page. And yeah, it's so political. It can be.
There was one project where we were basically, the guy dropped out of this particular project because we weren't giving them elevator access to the roof so that they could release radioactive isotopes into the atmosphere. Like, well, why would you want to?
Yeah. And when would that be okay?
Exactly.
That's a signal of progress right there. Wow. So you got your permit finally. You're only a year late.
We only submitted for permit.
Oh, sorry. You're right.
Oh no, it's still a 6-month process for review of this.
So this previous submittal was December 2019.
Yes.
And now we're in February 2021.
One. Don't forget
So
the one.
a little over a year.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
So
it's
significant changes or no?
when you had a 4-bay loading dock that went down to 2 bays, and this was on the front of the building, and then everything kind of had to respond to the deletion of those two, and all sorts of like little things that kind of were, it wasn't just like, oh yeah, we'll just get rid of that. On the surface, just getting rid of that's fine, but it's at ground level.
Mm-hmm.
You have 2 floors below that, and you have structure and everything else and all of this other stuff, and then you've got the 14 plus floors. I mean, if you count the mechanical penthouse and all that other stuff, it's a 15-story building. It just every little thing that you change has a cause and effect.
Yeah.
But by the way, since you were asking about that, you know how you had your electrical rooms here? Can you move them over there?
Yeah, that'd be great. Do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you come in on the weekends?
You to come in on Saturday. So, geez, man.
So, Evan, what's happening?
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Nothing ever changes. And then as soon as it gets built, they'll want to change the interior, do a TI. Wow. Yeah.
Okay.
So take me through like a meeting that you had with, or let's just paint a picture here, because I think this is one of those things when I have a good story about that kind of thing, where continually kind of talking through with the client or the user group, let's call it, for this particular space, over PDFs and plans and stuff like that, and 2D representation, and yep, that's what we want. That's what we want. Okay, so finally, it's like, you know what? Like, we're testing out. This was a few years ago. Let's test out this VR system. Let's put the client into there, and this happened to be a culinary teaching space, and so they put the head instructor into the VR headset, put him into the space, and they're like, why are there 3 sinks in here? And they're in like different locations. They're like, well, that's what you asked for, right? But you got to be a little bit gentle with that kind of a thing. So you can't just say, because that's what you said, right? You have to say, well, this is the layout that we, have been working through and agree, it's like, well, we don't need this here and we don't need that there. And and it was so different. And I guess that's my point is typically people can't, laymen, non-architects and people who work in our industry, they just can't read drawings, right? And it's not their fault. It's just how it is. And they don't, it's so interesting to see the complete transformation of them in a visual environment versus a 2D representation environment. And I'm just wondering, like, how did architecture get so far in 2D with these plan sets and buy-in from owners and user groups and all these things? And how much frustration has there been, and how many changes have there been? How much construction waste has there been modifying things after they've been built, like throwing away completely good construction materials to modify it for the real use, that if only the communication style could have been better to get those ideas across so that they knew exactly what they were getting. It's amazing to me how many people still ask the question, should I be doing VR? Should I be doing 3D renderings? And it's not to say it's easy, but it is to say that your job is to communicate. Your job is to communicate and get buy-in and gain consensus and get these things done. And I would also say be responsible with construction materials and waste and redo and timelines and budgets and all those kinds of things, right? So it seems to me like that it's not even something you should be talking about. You should just be doing it. So when you guys meet with these people and you I mean, obviously deleting two loading docks
right
doesn't really change, delete, right? In the computer, you're not working with gravity, you're not working with structural loads, you're not working with forces, you're not working with utility stacking necessarily. It's like diagramming at that point, right? So yeah, it looks like we could do that. And then you start to unravel the whole,
Right.
oh my God, look what this is going to do to hit this. And look, now we got to reroute that. And oh, now we got to figure this part out. And you kind of start to see that snowball effect happen as you work through those changes. But I'm wondering, like, when you guys are talking with the PIs and you're talking with the user groups and stuff, are you guys working visually? Or are you working in 2D? Like, especially now during COVID, I mean, I would assume that it's just all on the screen, right? It's not in person at all.
Honestly, to try to get as much information kind of because we aren't there to walk through and show them and maybe like hold up some materials or things like that. We'll have a 2D static plans and things to kind of take things through, and then we'll switch screens and we'll switch them to say Enscape, and we'll walk them through certain spaces. But even that, when you're looking at it on a screen, it still is a little bit foreign to them.
Degrees of separation, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's better than just showing them a picture. We basically will take a walkthrough with Enscape through Revit, and then we will take some Photoshop renderings that we'll export out of Revit, and then we'll take it into 3D Max or whatever else, and we'll start making all of our different renderings out of, and those help too. But like VR, especially right now, is so much easier to do, especially in complex spaces, and so that you really understand what you're really looking at. Like, so say if you have we have like a double height space, well, in a way it's almost a triple height space, but it's kind of stacked and it's open in certain areas and it's kind of compressed in others. But to really kind of understand that space, because it's the lobby, you want to walk through the front door. You want to walk into the kind of condensed vestibule and then let it expand a little bit.
You want to move
up
through that.
You want
to
walk exactly, and honestly, it's really kind of hard to do that in the virtual world right now, unless you're sending somebody, hey, put this link in here, and here we're sending you some goggles, and that you can drop your phone in and do whatever, or however you want to,
or something,
or an animation, and even that, sometimes, I mean, we've hit or miss with animations too.
Sure.
We try to do as many animations as possible to really kind of tell the story, but there's a lot of times when you almost have to feel like you're in the space before you really understand what it is that you're looking at. It's like, oh, let me turn the corner, and why do you have a rounded edge here and a square edge here? It's, oh, okay, I get it now. I see why that is. And just like the little things, and it really is kind of hard to kind of convey that. And we've had to do this, on many of our redesigns. We've had to do everything virtually, everything virtually, and it just. And it's really kind of hard. It's like a lot of times we'll find ourselves repeating ourselves. A lot of times we'll go back and kind of like back up a little bit. Okay, do you get what I'm showing you here? Oh, okay, yeah, now I do. Or no, can you go through it again? And it's and I don't fault them for wanting to go over it several times, because if you're sitting in your computer and you're staring at your screen and you're not kind of immersed into it. I mean, we've let's see, all the different deliverables that we've had for this. We've done site plans, or a site model, contextual model, where we've got like a physical model built into it that you can kind of interchange the massings and things like that. But then it's got all of the context, so you can kind of feel it and understand it and stuff. And then we've got an even larger model where we actually have like, this is what the fenestration is going to look like. Here's one with a frit pattern on it. Here's one without a frit pattern on it. And here's all these different things that we do, as well as the 2D static images, the 3D walkthroughs, and all of that other stuff, so that they can fully immerse themselves without having a built building to really understand what is going on. So we try every trick in the book to get them to understand and buy in, and to not be able to take at least a portion of that away from us. It's been challenging. I'll say that we have had some bit of success with it, because we do at least have the opportunity to like kind of walk through them, and since they've known it, and they we'll send them the model so that they have the model with them, and stuff like that. So, but man, is it tough.
Yeah. And going back to our last conversation about a 15 sheet set of drawings,
No, yeah,
and just thinking about back then it was a perspective drawing in pencil, right? That was it. That's all they
right.
got. And it was, I mean,
There,
nothing even close. And so how did the convincing, like, there was just seemed maybe there was a higher level of trust, and now we go overboard to over explain everything and make sure, because construction changes are so costly and there's so much scrutiny placed on that.
yeah, and you just said it, and you said it last time when we were talking about this. It's the level of trust. I mean, now, I mean, because everything is so easily accessible. I mean, whip me up a 3D, rendering of this or that or whatever, that they can kind of see it and, and understand a little bit more. Whereas back then, back in the day, they were able to, really, the architect had to convince them. The architect had to, say, buy in on this trust. And a lot of times we just, I don't know if we're either any good at or bad at. There's a gap in the level of trust. Let me restate it that way. There's a gap in the level of trust because we don't convince them that this is the right thing to do, or we inundate them. And here's another problem. We inundate them with so many options that we're not even committal to the right direction or the best direction. And so when we, aren't there to convince them, if we haven't even convinced ourselves that this is the right move, how are they going to be convinced of it?
Right. Yeah, there's a level of leadership that needs to happen there. I think a lot of times, and you have to read the client. Obviously, this just doesn't apply to everybody, but there's a lot of clients who want to be led through that, and they want to be shown what the best choices are because you're the expert. And there's other ones who just want to make all those decisions every single time. But I would say that you should default to the leadership style, because that is going to get you to the finish line faster if you can make really solid recommendations and back those up with data. Data doesn't have to mean a spreadsheet. It could mean it could mean an experience in VR. It could mean a rendering. It could be these things. But it does kind of, I think, come back to what you're saying, is there does seem to be kind of a lack of leadership through the process, where it is like, well, what do you think, A or B? Like, it's totally up to you.
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of clients like, oh, if it's totally up to me, then I want to see something different, or I want to see a mix of those things, or I want to see a little bit of that one and a lot of that one and mixed together, right? So
yeah,
I can sympathize with that process, but it is pretty painful to go through, and to kind of not have a point of view as the expert, I think is leaving way too much on the table, and kind of leaving the process open for total uncertainty at so many levels along the way. So this isn't anything they teach in school, right? No, you kind of get hardened, and I mean, maybe that's not the right word, but you do learn how to present, but you're presenting to people who understand what they're looking at, and you're presenting not very much detail, and you're not giving people options. So you're not getting trained in this at all. Like, you're showing the choices you made, period, right? And hopefully you're being able to show how you got there. But when you're not giving in, there's no client, right? So you're not giving them options about things. But then it seems like when we go into professional practice, it's like, man, options up the Yahoo.
Exactly. Yeah.
Option 9B, right? I'll mix a little bit of 9B with 19T, and
exactly. Yeah, like, can you get 1A, a 3B, do you want seasoning on that?
It was just a little spice. Yeah, it's the variations of options. That's where things get really complicated.
How about a 13Z?
Well, and this is where the whole like generative design hype that Autodesk is really pushing, amongst others, gets frustrating, right? Because like we've been through this where it's like, man, yeah, we've got 9 different schemes, and within each scheme there's several variations, and because we could go this direction or we can go that direction, and that's when it's totally out of control, and you never want to actually get into that situation. But now you're talking about generative design, and it's like, well, there's 1,000 options for you to choose from. We call it optioneering, and it's fantastic because it gives you all these possible starting points, and then you can select by criteria and narrow those down to, and it's like, yeah, but really, I mean, that it opens up this world of, okay, this is all based on the constraints that you designed. Hopefully they were right. And here are a bunch of subtle options or not so subtle options within the criteria that you defined. And the selling point is, they say, well, it's going to give you stuff that you couldn't have thought of, or you could have only generated 2 schemes in that time. But it basically is taking all of your designer experience out of the equation, right? And it's solely basing it on constraints that are pretty much mathematical, right? Like they're geometric constraints, or they're zoning constraints, or hard-coded constraints, because they have to be. Man, I think it's kind of a mess, right? It's like, as clients ask for data-driven decisions, that may be a starting point, but I don't need 1,000 of them. I can guarantee you like 900 of them are bad options, right? So it is kind of I don't necessarily need more options. I think every time you go into a client, like, you really actually just want to have, like, here's the solution.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And we went through this with a, we had one of those like presentation coaches come in. So obviously I did a really good job because, with it. But he was just like, architects, I don't understand, because they come in not with like this declarative, this is the design, but they come up with all of these options, and they present all of the, let's just say, throwaway options first. And then they say, and this is where we got to. Like, why don't you just go straight to, and, we looked at all of these different things. However, what I'm going to show you is, kind of the conglomeration of all of those things.
It's the best.
Now, if you say, well, did you think about this? Yeah, you could bring it up and at least talk about it, because you did do the optioneering. You did do the, the iterative designs on, numerous different, thousands of different iterations. And so you can speak to what the, pros and cons of that particular thing is. But when you, just come in and you say, well, let me show you all of these different options, but we don't really like those options. We like this option. And then you've sold them on a bunch of stuff that they might be developing in their own mind. Okay, yeah, I do like that. Oh, this is interesting. And then you say, and this is the, the final solution. And you're like, well, is it? But you just talked about all of these other things.
Right.
Like, no, go in there and present the idea.
That's that leadership part. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, we all do it.
We do.
We go in with these, here's our 3 options.
The royal we. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Typically 3 options, right? Why 3?
Exactly. Well, 1's not enough. 2, you seem a little wishy-washy. You couldn't commit to, the 50% or the 50%. But 3, now you've really done a lot of work.
I guess what it comes back to for me is that, yeah, you do go through all that, but it doesn't mean you have to show it all, right? And because when you are going through that process, you are learning, and you probably are going to come up with a better scheme if you keep trying. At least your initial kind of intuitive approach, you should try to break it, right? Because maybe it's great, but maybe it's not. So try to break it and come up with other very different, or whatever, just try to do something that breaks it or goes in a different direction or whatever. But doesn't mean you have to show all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, your gut feeling may be right, but you've got to test it. Yeah. And you've got to, quantify it with a bunch of other, you have to do the research. You have to figure out, well, is it the right, solution?
I think that's probably the thing that bugs me the most about optioneering as a, this generative design term, is that you going through the process learn a lot by doing that, and you get to apply that. And I think by just testing out a bunch of different things without really, it's not learning, it's not teaching itself. And it will definitely get there for sure if it's not there already. But, kind of on the surface level that we're talking about right now with the generative design optioneering stuff that we're seeing, it's just like, here's all of the sliders in every different possible configuration. Boom. That doesn't show me that you've learned anything along the way. And I think that by removing that piece of this equation, it really does start to take away from the purpose of the architect, of the designer in that. And to me, that's the biggest piece missing from that. And I think that you can't not look at that part of it as probably the key component to coming up with a successful design. And I'm sure I get pushback on that, but
Oh, well, yeah, but I mean, if you think about it, you go in there with 30 different slider ideas, and then you're like, okay, well, what do you think, Mr. and Mrs. Owner?
what's important to you? Yeah.
What's important to you? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I mean, aren't you supposed to tell me what is the right solution, the wrong solution, and anything in between? I mean, I could go in and say, well, sliders this is the one slider that we just chose on because the constraints that we have needs to meet an STC criteria. No, we don't need it to swing into the path of travel because we don't have that 50% clearance on all of these other things. And, so you go through the rattling down of like all of the different reasons why you chose it, if that's, part of your narrative. But at least what you're trying to say to them is that, hey, I did the research and this is what I feel like is the best solution for that. And they're like, okay, I got you. Thank you.
Yeah. Make it easy for them to make a decision.
Right.
Yep. Totally.
Instead of coming in and saying, okay, well, here's 30. Which one do you like?
Yeah. Make them feel confident in their decision too.
Right. Make them feel confident in the fact that, you know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. So, generative design for everybody?
Generative design for nobody. Or leave it at home because...
Yeah, there you go. I like that. Leave it at home. You can do it. Just limit the exposure.
You should. We should do it. I mean, that's what conceptual design and schematic design is all about. But you don't you literally don't have to bring everything and the kitchen sink to them to present to them and say, see, we've been working. We've earned we've earned what we've been billing to you so far. I think that might be it. You think that might be it? That we're trying to prove like we've actually like done what they've asked us to do?
I think so. I think it's like, well, look at all these hours that we spent. Here's what we did. Yeah. And so it's justification from that kind of point of view. And ultimately, like, no one's going to remember those hours that you spent doing all that.
Right. No.
They want to see the outcomes.
Exactly.
That's it, man.